Welcome back. This is a message from a Watchman. This is part 3 of Beginnings. My name is Symmanayah, and again I say welcome back. Thanks for tuning in to part 3 of Beginnings. Let me begin first by reading this disclaimer. The views expressed in this presentation do not reflect the views of any technological portal that I'm using, i.e. YouTube, Ustream, Facebook, Talk, or any other such communication portals. My views do not reflect the views of the owners of the technological means in which I convey a message. Like with any other information presented, you are advised to do your own research and draw your own conclusions. The Father's name in ancient Hebrew, one of the first most powerful symbols defining the Almighty Father's name, is believed to be the picture that you see below. It is believed to be interpreted as behold, nail, behold, hand, or if it's read from right to left, hand, behold, nail, behold. As you can see, this represents the ancient symbol for the Father's name. And as time progressed, many of us are not aware that this represented the Father, the Almighty Yahuah's name in ancient Hebrew form. Now we look and we see that as time progressed, we see his name now in Paleo Hebrew. Still 4 symbols, which probably at this point we start calling letters. And as you can see, the Paleo is a little bit different, or quite different, should I say, quite different from the ancient. And time progressed, and as time progressed, we see that it went from Paleo to modern Hebrew. And now modern Hebrew took on another look in itself. And we can see that by this next slide, that the modern Hebrew, the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, we see that the modern Hebrew have a whole different look. The modern Hebrew is used in many of the writings that were found probably in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I don't know. We're given so many messages and so many stories. So as you can see here, the Father's name in written form took on many shapes, many characteristics. But all in all, as we see these characteristics, we come to realize that we must make a choice. We must make a decision. And as for me and my house, the decision we have come to believe to be true is to use the Father's name as Yahuah. We have studied and prayed and researched. And as for me and my house, we have come to be at peace with the name Yahuah. We know that the English translation from the modern Hebrew was brought about as a result of using 4 letters. We know that those letters are depicted in this next slide. YHWH. And in some cases, some people might say YHVH. There's question to whether it should be a V or a W. But nevertheless, as I stated, we are compelled to use the name Yahuah to represent the Father, the Almighty Elohim. We are compelled to believe that the Father Yahuah, our Father, manifest in the flesh as the arm of redemption, as the Word made flesh, under the banner, under the label, under the name Yahusha, as the next slide depicts. And so here we say Yahusha is our Messiah. We say it is through Yahusha that we're able to reach the Father. It is here that we say Yahusha and the Father are one. It is here that we believe that upon his resurrection, it is the Spirit of Yahusha that guides us along this journey, that helps us to understand the written word. That it is in his guidance, and it is by his Spirit that we're able to understand and rightly divide the word of truth as guided and compelled by his Spirit. Yahusha is his name. While there are those who would debate and argue the name of Yahusha, I have come to the conclusion that Yahusha is the name I will use and echo as it relates to my understanding of Scripture. And so let us continue on. And for those of you who debate the name or want to argue over it, that is your choice. As for me and my household, we will say Yahusha. Since there are scriptures, scriptures come in many different ways in terms of language. So since there are many variations of scripture, I will only post the location of the passage of scripture, which I will be referencing, as you noticed earlier in previous slides. And so I do this because I can copy and paste the version I'm using, and maybe you might see a slight different meaning to the verse in the version that you're using. I encourage you to have your resource handy, your scriptures, or whatever resources you use to validate the voice of Yahusha, the Spirit of Yahusha. And I think this is important because, one, by you having your scriptures handy, you're able to look at these scriptures and read them for yourself, opposed to saying I'm echoing sentiments of what Symmanayah said, but it is better for you to read it directly yourself. Let's examine some things in Scripture. Let's begin. Let's look at some things in Genesis, which is also known as Bereshit. Here we see one thing many believers are coming to realize is that pagan terms the pagan terms used in an attempt to hide the Almighty Father's name are an abomination. In other words, we see in the book that people call by a different name with a B word. We see that book widely known as the book containing the scriptures inspired by the Elohim, Almighty Yahuah. And so a lot of pagan terms were introduced, terms that are not names, but terms that were used in an attempt to hide the Father's true name and the sacrificed Son's true name, for this is very important. I am compelled to avoid using such abominations and therefore suggest that you do your own research with much prayer. It would be wise to have pure intentions that include worship and obeying the Almighty Father according to His scriptures, His words. Because what I found, and I've probably said it earlier, is that if your intentions aren't true, if your heart isn't true with the goal to worship and obey the Most High, then what you're going to find is struggle in understanding scriptures. Some scriptures you will find it a struggle. And I am persuaded to believe that it is designed this way to dumbfound those who think that they're smart or think that they're wise. Let's consider the beginnings of creation. From heavens and earth, we know that it is Yahuah that created the heavens and the earth. He made light and called it day, and darkness and called it night. He made land, the earth, and the waters and the seas, vegetation, the grass, the seeds, the fruits, and every known vegetation that was naturally formed by him. And naturally he created all the creatures, and he created both male and female, or man and woman. And on the seventh day he rested. This is all documentation in the scriptures. If you look at Genesis, or Bereshit as it is known by some that are coming into an understanding of Hebrew for Genesis as Bereshit, let's examine some key words and phrases. look at Bereshit 1:26 through 28. Notice that he said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them rule over the earth. Next, we will move to the characteristics of Yahuah's creation, man, in the second chapter of Genesis or Bereshit. The second chapter will continue to use some key words and phrases paraphrase. Man was formed from the dust of the ground. We see that one component of man was that our flesh was formed from the dust of the ground. We see that Yahuah breathed into man's nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. Here we can see is the shell of man that was formed from the dust of the ground received a spirit. For breathe, the word breathe could also be considered one of the definitions of Ruach. So man received his spirit by virtue of Yahuah breathing into the nostrils of the image that he formed out of the ground. And when he did that, man became alive, and there was some fellowship with man. Man was given responsibilities, and these responsibilities were to work and guard the Garden of Eden, to till the ground, to nurture the garden. And there were some instructions given with rules, complete with benefits, which include food and environment, a nice and a beautiful environment, and consequences which led to death or the broken fellowship of man with the Almighty. We see a woman was created, which many people know by the English term as Eve, and of course she have a Hebrew term, and I don't know it right offhand. And then we see in the wake of the creation of Adam and Eve, in other words, after this occurred, we see that the serpent is brought on board, and we see that the fallen we see that the serpent basically was used by Shaitan or Satan, and he used deceptive language, deceptive communications to entice Eve, and therefore as a result disobedience occurred amongst Eve and Adam and Eve. And so we see one of the first the first demonstration of rebellion in terms of man and his fellowship and his walk with the Father. So rebellion becomes visible, separation of fellowship begins as a result of eating of the forbidden fruit. And so Yahuah's plan for restoration begins with man and women's ability to have children. Many people miss this event. They miss that a situation occurred where mankind was allowed to begin to procreate, and this, to me, I am compelled to believe this marks the beginning of the plan that Yahuah have to restore man in fellowship with him. This concludes part 3 of Beginnings. Again, this concludes part 3. Stay tuned as the playlist continues. Stay tuned for part 4 of Beginnings. My name is Symmanayah, and thanks for tuning in. Thanks for staying and listening to the continuation of Beginnings. Shalom.